Five, four, three, two. Welcome to the
I'm your host, Jacob Peppercorn, and tonight
we are coming to you with a very special episode.
it's
It's
an
an
emergency
emergency
episode,
episode,
I
I
would
would
say.
say.
Um,
The
big
big
news
news
dropped
dropped today.
today. George Quarles
Quarles
uh,
by
by ETSU,
ETSU, um,
um,
and
and
I
I
think
think
it
it
goes
goes
without
without
saying.
saying.
I
I
think
think
it was expected,
uh,
but
tonight I'm welcoming my friend
Ben
Ben
Parrish,
Parrish,
who's
who's a
part
part
of
of
the
the
ETSU
ETSU
Buccaneers. He's a ETSU alum, and he's going to join in tonight because he's sort of been keeping up with the coaching search all day, and uh, I'm in group chats with him on Twitter. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, for having me on. So as Jacob said, I'm a huge ETSU fan. Really been for most of my life. I remember growing up as a kid in the Tri Cities and going to ETSU basketball games. Then I was an alum at ETSU or alum from ETSU. Most of you probably know me better as ETSU Buckeye on Twitter. So I'm happy to be on, and it's obviously, like you said, a big news day for ETSU athletics.
Okay, so just gonna talk about uh, uh, George. Without further ado, we're just gonna get into the news right away. George Quarles, he got uh, he was let go today. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that is like you said, Jacob. I'm not sure that it comes as a surprise to many people,
yeah,
yeah,
but I think it's tough anytime you see anybody lose their job, and I think not just for George Quarles, but obviously all the assistants on staff. I know we have several Buccaneer alums that are on the staff as well. So
mhm,
obviously, it's a little bit of a delicate subject to hate to see any of those individuals lose their jobs, and their life's kind of up in the air right now. But I think it was the right move for the program, and I think going forward, I think we're going to end up in better hands. Um, and I think we'll touch on it, but going 3-8 in consecutive seasons after
mhm.
the trajectory of the program when he took over. So is really the record and performance kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, I mean, we were all hopeful after the Randy Sanders era that the momentum would carry on with whoever took over the program. Um,
Exactly.
and I mean, George Coral, I think they made the hire with George Coral's sort of getting into it. I think they
Mhm.
thought maybe his high school success would transfer over, um,
Right.
and he'd have those recruiting lanes and sort of get players in. But
Mhm.
his recruiting hasn't been that great in
Yeah,
general.
he's gotten some good players. I think what's concerned me a little bit is his unwillingness to seem to want to hit the portal.
Yeah.
I know that's bothered a lot of Buck fans a little bit. And then when we have hit the portal, it doesn't really look like we've been successful in a lot of positions. And I think in a lot of ways it could have led to his downfall a little bit at DTSU. But I mean, at least speaking for Buck Nation kind of as a whole, I think we're appreciative that George Quarles put in the effort at ETSU, and I know we wish it would have went a lot differently,
Mhm.
but I think it's kind of turn our vision towards the future and kind of seeing what the future brings for ETSU football.
Yeah, I know it's just a delicate subject. Since a lot of people, I know you'd mentioned it, a lot of
Right.
people are losing their jobs potentially. But I mean, I think we all saw this coming. It was sort of on the mind of every
Yeah.
Buccaneer football fan. Um, a
a
lot
lot
of
of people.
people outside the program don't seem to understand it, but once they look at the record, like the teams we have
Yeah.
and
And
the
the teams
teams
we
we
had beat,
beat,
you know,
the
2-3-8 records.
Yeah,
not a single win over a D1 team that had a winning record.
exactly, and that's kind of what I was touching on here at the start of the show. You know, coming into Quarles' time at ETSU, I mean, the program was really on an upswing. I mean, I was having a discussion with some UT fan earlier on Twitter or X, you know, talking about Randy Sanders' time at ETSU, and during his time at ETSU, I mean, he went 8-4 in his first year. I mean, you could say those were Torbush's guys, but I mean, he went 8-4 his first year, co-champs of the SoCon. Year two, we went 3-9, but if you remember, that was the year that, you know, I think we had like 4 quarterbacks get hurt, similar to this year. But then, you know, the following season was COVID, but so ETSU played in the spring, and Randy Sanders' team went 4-2. And really, the only reason why they weren't co-champs that spring season is because Chattanooga bailed on us, and we had less opportunities for wins than I think it was it VMI that won the spring season? I forget who
Yeah,
it was,
they did.
but so then, you know, of course, that just went right into the fall season, which of course we all remember. We're 11-2 and FCS quarterfinalists. So I mean, the trajectory of the program at the time was really at its peak, and I know we had a lot of interest in the job at the time. You know, don't really want to go too much into that, but obviously, you know, there were big names like Jeff Fisher and I know NDSU's offensive coordinator Tyler Rowe. Yeah. So I mean, those were obviously some big names, as well as, you know, Buck fans on Twitter have been quick to point out that VMI's current head coach, I forget his name, but he interviewed for the job and then he turned around and beat us. So so as you can see, it's probably had a chip on his shoulder a little bit there when he played ETSU for not getting the job the first time.
His name was
Danny Rococo. He was at Richmond before he came to VMI. That's who he went to Richmond and then he went to Delaware. Russ Huseman from Chattanooga replaced him. They had Chattanooga football in a successful place about now.
Yeah, it's about
10
years ago now.
I remember when Chattanooga was like, when we came into the conference, they were like the top dog of SoCon football at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, say what you will about the rivalry and my disdain for Chattanooga, but I mean, came out today, they made the playoffs, so
yeah,
good for them. I'm still a big fan of Chase Artopius, which we talked about. Quarles not having success out of the portal. I've heard you mention him before.
That. I've talked about him in several episodes. I mean, having a UCLA, that would have been massive on this team. I know I like Tyler Riddell, you know, but with his injury history, it's kind of tough.
Yeah, and you probably can't put too much blame on Quarles. I know I've been told that Artopius had a visit planned to ETSU, but visited Chattanooga and committed before that, and then canceled the ETSU visit. So probably not much we can do in that situation. Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't have the first visit, or else maybe things are different. But yeah, I think there's I've heard several names mentioned. I know it's been big on you know, Buck Twitter today, that, you know, all the names, and even on Facebook as well. Everybody's throwing out some names and interest for people that they hope are interested in the job. So I'm sure Doc Sanders probably got quite a few phone calls coming in, and of different people that are interested in the job. So
no. Doc Sanders he probably has a binder already. He probably already has names to go through. We're kind of going to get into that a little bit, because I've kind of compiled a list when it was becoming abundantly clear that Quarles was going to get let go this year. I kind of started early, got an early head start. I know we've talked about that. It's going to people that interviewed last time are going to be on there. Our dream candidates, unrealistic candidates.
Jimbo Fisher.
Jimbo Fisher, Dino Babers. like
anybody that's
you know we
can
can
think
think of.
of.
I've wrote them down. And
Stories,
like
realistic,
realistic,
uh,
wild
wild cards.
cards, like people that I
Don't
don't
know
know
if
if
they're
they're
going to
going
get
to get
hired.
hired.
And then,
And
of
of
course,
course,
you
you got
got
your
your
unrealistic
Yeah.
people that are just it's like I'm just putting them in there just for to talk, discussion to talk.
Yeah. Might as well start with the unrealistic ones just to have some fun right off the bat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm probably going to do that. Uh, Let me think.
Yeah,
Is there
one of the
anything
things that
else?
one of the things I was just gonna kind of talk about is Doc Sander. I think originally he was involved, I believe, in hiring Torbush because I guess he would have been the athletic director at the time, I believe. Yeah, he would have been, I believe. And I know he had a lot of help from Philip Fulmer in making that hire and making sure that think football was set up right for the future. And he's been open many times before about how basketball is his thing, and he's really good at understanding basketball, but he's not so good on the football side of things. I know he's
Yeah,
mentioned that on Jay Sando's podcast on the Inside the Dome episodes. I think he's mentioned that before. So I saw somebody, and I forget I'd shout him out. Somebody on X earlier mentioned um, that or maybe it was on Facebook. I can't remember, but somebody mentioned Jamie Chadwell, big time Buck alum, having all kinds of success at Liberty. I hopefully Doc Sander can reach out to him and maybe get some names or some interest from some coaches that he knows, because obviously he's a super successful FBS coach with ETSU ties, so maybe he's got some contacts that he can get us in touch with that may be interested, and maybe someone's knowledge to leverage in the job search for ETSU's next head coach.
yeah. I know
No,
he
he
just
just
has
has.
the connections everywhere. He's been around so long. Of course, he came from VCU, where he helped build the basketball program there, had a hand in building what they are today. With
Right.
Shaka after through Shaka Smart, Mike Rhodes, Will, unfortunately
Unfortunately,
Will
Will.
Wade. But like I had to say that because he's a Chattanooga coach and part of that FBI uh, scandal in college hoops. Um,
I mean, we got the last laugh though, and
yeah, yeah,
with the 2020 team that went down there and just
yeah,
destroyed them.
yeah, yeah.
But
Um, but I trust Doc Sander to make a great hire. All
All
the
the
hires
hires he's
he's made,
made.
he's stabilized ETSU athletics. His first time here and his second tenure, he's been sort of cleaning up some of the mess. Scott Carter left. It's fair to say that. Just
yeah,
like all the controversies, with the Jason's Chase stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
the
And I
Des.
saw, I think maybe it was you earlier. Somebody in our group chat had posted I think it was the Football Scoop article that
Mhm.
called Scott Carter the well liked AD, and I'm
Yeah,
thinking like, where did they get that? I mean that. We've talked about it before, and I don't know if you've talked about it on here. I can't remember, but it's like a long line of his hires at ETSU have either been fired or had to resign with
yeah.
some type of controversy. Um, I mean, it even goes to the softball and um,
Softball, women's basketball, the Title
yeah,
IX violation.
yeah,
Um, I just I
I think Scott Carter was a character, I'd say.
just the
People
people
he
he
was
was
entrusted.
yeah,
entrusting with the athletics program, uh, sort of
yeah. I
who he
think
entrusted uh, different sports.
yeah, and I kind of got the impression that Scott Carter did a lot of his analysis for job hires based off whether or not he liked them or he had a prior connection to them,
Yeah, yeah.
more so on kind of their past
Mhm.
experiences. And I think coming into the George Quarles era. I think a lot of Buck fans and ETSU alums had similar questions about that hire. There wasn't really a lot of previous success outside of the high school ranks. I mean, obviously, he's arguably maybe the best high school coach in the country, but at the time of his hire, we had, in my opinion, a lot better candidates that were in the job pool that were interested in ETSU. So I was really surprised with the hire with George Quarles in the first place.
Yeah, I think just knowing what we know about the candidate pool from the last hiring, I think
Yeah.
he might have been the worst, least qualified person in that pool of people.
Yeah, which is saying something too, because like we said, I mean, he was a really successful high school coach, and
Yeah,
obviously he's really well respected. Um, which, and again, I I don't really want to talk bad about him. It's probably obviously a bad situation for him
yeah,
to be
yeah,
losing his
yeah,
job, even though I think according to his contract, he's likely going to get a $400,000 buyout unless ETSU found some kind of cause, which I highly doubt. Um, but it's really the guys and women on the staff that are don't get that buyout. So you definitely feel for them a little bit.
yeah. I mean, it's just the best profession is a fired college football head coach. I know,
It's like
I know.
like Jimbo
I think
Fisher.
I think everybody in the U.S. wants to be Jimbo Fisher right now.
because
He
you get
gets
78 million to
Exactly.
just go play golf and
time with his
Hey,
grandkids.
we have really nice lakes and golf courses here
yeah,
in East Tennessee. Maybe
good
maybe he wants to come.
good retirement community. Come do like Carl Torbush and
Exactly.
coach his last few years here. Uh,
It's a pipe.
but
I'm gonna
sort of get this
Exactly.
emergency podcast. We're gonna sort of get into the candidate list, so we don't go too late. I'm planning on just running this podcast for maybe about 40
see how long we take on.
on the candidates. How I'm not gonna try to go
Yeah.
too late, um, but I'm just gonna sort of break down, and we're gonna talk about some of the names and who you're. I'm gonna do a top three. I'll let you do a top three, and then I'll probably. Um, but
Okay.
first thing I wanted to do. We're gonna sort of break down into some of the unrealistic candidates I wrote down. Uh, of course, we mentioned Jimbo Fisher. He's probably not going to come here for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
He's probably done coaching.
Yeah,
If
and
we're
even
being
then, he's probably
honest,
going to have then he's probably going to have some higher suitors than ETSU. But like we said, he doesn't need the
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
he's
Probably
probably
gonna
going
go
to be
beat
Nick
Saban.
Saban's recruit like analyst. That's probably where he's going to end up. That's
Would Wouldn't surprise me.
yeah. Um, and then of course, as far as unrealistic, let's see, I'd say that's my second page. Dino Babers, he's probably unrealistic. He's probably going to go be a OC on some Power Five staff, OC or quality control, um, especially since he's 62 years old.
Looking, I wrote down some of like
The Deion Sanders appeal type people. I wrote I wrote down Jason. I thought about that because he's a high school coach, but
Yeah,
I don't think we want to.
yeah. I actually was thinking about that one earlier, and I
Yeah,
know that somebody on my X, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
I still want to call it Twitter. It
You,
sounds weird to
I
call
mean,
it X.
I'm gonna call it Twitter. Let's be honest.
Somebody on my Twitter says, I forget who it is, or I'd mentioned the name. Somebody earlier said that they live real close to where he's coaching down in high school in Texas,
Mhm.
and that last year when he had all this success, they mentioned that the teams that his high school was facing was really overmatched, and then he's really struggled this year in that division with some stronger teams. So it's kind of interesting. Like you said, it's kind of a splashy name. Definitely, there's a lot of people in Texas that would want to come play for a Hall of Fame caliber tight end that played his whole career there in Dallas. So it's definitely some appeal to it because you'd be able to tap into that recruiting ground in Texas. But again, it's just having that high school experience is a little risky in my opinion.
It's just kind of a Dion type thing for ETSU. I mean,
Yep.
I wrote some names down. I wrote down. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Philip Rivers. That's in the same vein as Jason Witten.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning. Get Kenny Chesney on the phone. Talk to Peyton Manning and ask if he wants to go coach an FCS program.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that's one of those splashy ones that it's kind of the Dion effect there.
Yeah. Jeff Saturday. I wrote that down as a Colts fan. I think that would be absolutely hilarious, to be honest. He's a good motivator. I will say that. But
Graham Harrell, Purdue OC is a.
just as I wrote that down as a joke, pretty much. Let's see. Is there any other of these unrealistic names? Brian Barom, Louisville OC. Yeah, he wouldn't come to ETSU.
And I would add one more that's probably unrealistic, but it's probably going to be in your list for maybe possibility, would be Eddie George. But I just looked up right before this. Apparently, he's making $400,000 a year at Tennessee State plus incentives. Probably a little bit out of ETSU's budget. I mean, I could be surprised. I know he's voiced some frustrations with Tennessee State's fans not showing up to the games, which he obviously wouldn't have a problem with in Johnson City, but probably more on the unrealistic side. But I mean, I think you've also got a little bit of concerns about Eddie George anyway, not having a lot of success until they combined with the Big South.
Yeah, I kind of struggled. He's like he got hired at the same time as Dion, and he hasn't had near the success.
Kind of overshadowed a little bit there.
Yeah. And like Tennessee State's not been as much of a successful program anyway.
But I will say I'm a huge Eddie George fan as a Buckeye fan. So obviously can't go wrong with Eddie George. But I just think it's probably a little bit of a stretch with the amount of money he's already making there and living in Nashville, where he obviously had a long NFL career. He probably thinks of that area as home.
Another one on there that I'd consider sort of on my list. I wrote down a whole bunch of names I consider unrealistic is UT's offensive coordinator. He's just too inexperienced. I don't think anyone would want him hired here anyway.
Yeah, I could probably speak for a lot of Buck fans, and obviously there's a lot of Buck fans that overlap with their Vols fandom and ETSU fandom, but I think ETSU should probably stay away from the UT connections for a little bit.
Yeah, that probably is a good idea.
Anyway, I think that's all the unrealistic names I have. Well, I have a few. Actually, think about it. I wrote down Chris Hatch. I wrote any existing SoCon head coach probably not going to come to ETSU unless it's VMI or Citadel.
Probably not. And like you mentioned, VMI. I forget what was their former coach's name.
Scott Wyatt.
Scott Wachenheim. Yeah.
Wachenheim.
Yeah, I know he interviewed for the ETSU job when Quarles got it, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibility because I know ETSU probably has more money than some of the schools in the Southern Conference, but maybe not at the moment with how many former coaches we've had to pay thanks to Scott Carter's hires when during his regime.
Uh, I know
So
he retired. He had that one season at VMI. That he, I think VMI,
VMI, of course, is the transfer portal.
they lost a lot of their talent and just ran out of steam,
Right.
and he retired.
They retired because
That
that
was
was VMI's
best
season
season
since
probably
probably the 70s, honestly.
Um,
Yeah, he really had them
T
rolling.
interviewed here last time.
And it's kind of interesting. VMI kind of did the switch to that air raid offense before Citadel obviously just trying to do it a little bit since they changed the rules with the chop block. So all those military academies are trying to change a little bit to adapt to the times. I think VMI and Wackenheim kind of did that before it was really cool. Although I'm not entirely sure VMI ever really ran a triple option, but they definitely weren't like that air raid like they were when back in that spring season and the year after.
yeah, I I think one thing I'm looking for in like a head coach is someone with an interesting
It knows.
Yeah,
offense like the back of their hand. I haven't wrote down too many defensive names on it.
which I think is also kind of risky a little bit. I worry about that a little bit because obviously as an Ohio State fan, I watched Ohio State transition from the Jim Tressel days of always having like the best defense in the country, and then they switched into Urban Meyer, which obviously was a great offensive innovative mind, but then for several years Ohio State really struggled on defense, and there's a couple years in there where Ohio State probably could have won a national title, but their defense just wasn't very good. It's kind of, if you don't have the ball last, it's hard to win. So
I mean,
it's something Buck fans haven't had to worry about for a while with Billy Taylor at the DC
yeah.
position, which who knows if he's going to be retained. I think there's a lot of talk that we've heard. I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of talk we've heard from where some players and family members of players are saying that they've been told Billy Taylor won't return or won't be retained. But obviously, a lot of that probably depends on who the new head coach is, and obviously that decision would likely be up to them.
I know sort of
Or
realistic candidates for the job. Of course, we have Billy Taylor, our defensive coordinator. I know he may not be retained
for the job.
I've also seen that
Yeah,
he's probably going to make his case. We'll see how the interview process goes. They
May
may
have
say
said he's
he's not getting it already. We don't know what's going on in the locker room entirely. But
yeah,
if for someone that bleeds ETSU, that's your guy.
exactly. I mean,
And
not many guys who coached at ETSU before the program was disbanded and then came back and kind of stuck through, thick and thin with the program, regardless of whether or not whatever the future holds for Billy Taylor. I know Buck fans are extremely grateful for his time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears into the program as a former player all the way through coach.
I know because he's been, he's always been a consistent rock. Even when we were, first starting our team,
Mm-hmm.
first starting the program back, they've been solid. He's always found
Yeah,
playmakers from the Dylan Weigels, Tyree Robinson, the Sear
exactly.
player. He found all those gems. He went out and
Yeah.
got them. He knew where to put scheme players,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's been rock solid. So whatever happens, I'm grateful for him.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think just real quick on Billy Taylor while we're talking about him, I know a lot of Buck fans and I'm sure a lot of players
mhm,
would like to see Billy Taylor elevated the head coach. Um, One of the things I just wanted to mention about that is I'm not real sold on that. I wouldn't be against it if at the end of the day he ends up being elevated the head coach. Um, but I'm a little apprehensive about it. And Jacob, I mean, the main reason for me is that just kind of the importance for ETSU of getting this hire right. We've already talked about the trajectory the program was on under Randy Sanders, and then after, like you said, back-to-back 3-8 seasons, ETSU can't afford to make another mistake on the coaching hire. The next guy has to be successful. It doesn't have to be instant. As long as they can start building that kind of upward trajectory back to where ETSU wants to be, sort of in that upper echelon of FCS programs. So I think there's a really strong importance on making sure you get the hire right, and that concerns me a little bit for a guy who's kind of been a lifelong assistant. Granted, he's been one of the best lifelong assistants during his career, but it concerns me a little bit that he doesn't have the experience running a program. And as we've seen with the George Quarles tenure, running a program with the expectations of ETSU has a lot of pressure on you, and to make sure that everything is kind of running smoothly, and you kind of can follow through what everybody's doing without having to micromanage all your coaches.
It all just depends on what candidate. I know,
just exactly.
For I personally think like it just depends. The the
7 or 8 they've targeted him on,
and Billy Taylor.
Vision,
yeah.
Best, plan for the future of the program.
Then by all means hire him, because.
Yeah, exactly. I probably speak for a lot of Buck fans aren't going to be upset if he gets hired, But but I think the other side of it is I'm not sure that a lot of Buck fans are really sold on him being head coach. But again, we're going to trust Doc, I think, in that process.
Yeah, that's my big thing. Like, I know Billy Taylor's
been
like
the
main head of recruiting
for ETSU since the program came back.
Yeah.
So on the recruiting side, I think we'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
It's all, in that case, it would all come down to
his offensive hires, offensive staffing. Who would he go out and get? And he very well may not even want the job this time. It just all depends on what.
Yeah, it's true. Especially kind of after I think he's been passed over the last couple times, I believe.
Yeah.
So I know he may not even really want it, but I guess I don't really know what else to say about it. I'm not sure if definitely above my pay grade to try to judge whether or not he's qualified for it. Obviously, he has a long history of success, but I can only kind of give my kind of apprehensions about it. But I know that Doc Sanders is probably going to make the best hire for ETSU.
And I just know that it just depends on what a coach's values are. Is he going to stay here? Is he planning on being at ETSU, or is he going to be a, jump after 2 years? I think that plays into it. As we get into some of the other names.
Yeah, and real quick, Jake, I'm glad you said that thing right there, because we've had the talk on the basketball side for a while that it's kind of the old adage, if no other team wants your head coach, then you probably don't have a good head coach. So it kind of sucks to after maybe 2-3 years have to go find another head coach. But if that's the case and they left because they were successful, your program also reaped the benefits of that. So you can't be really too afraid of somebody using your university as a stepping stone. Obviously, you don't want them to pull Lane Kiffin and bolt after one season. That's unacceptable. But if they put in really 3 good years, I would say, I think that's about all you can ask for.
I'm fine with that. It's just not bolting after 2 years or 1 year or whatever, just because they have.
Yeah, if they bolt after 1 year, hopefully it's after a national championship.
Yeah. That's the only acceptable
Right.
go down. Um, I just know that James Madison's cycled through 2 or 3 coaches in their
Yeah.
last 10 years or so, but I think they're fine with it. But I was gonna get into some of the more like name of some other names. Talking about ETSU guys, there was another one interesting name I've seen out there, Donnie Abram. Uh,
Yeah, I've been seeing that one a lot as well, and uh,
uh,
I love Donnie, and I love the appreciation for some former Bucks, but I mean Donnie just hasn't really done much in the way of college coaching, and I think actually I don't think, let me double check. I'm not sure if this will cut my camera or not if I switch tabs, but yeah, I mean he's coached in a few different high schools, and then he's coached in the Arena Football League. Obviously, he had a 1 year stint at an
XFL.
IMG Academy in Florida, and then now he's
he was
with
at
the
Illinois.
going from
XFL.
yeah. I think the main thing that concerns me about his tenure is he just hasn't really had any sort of long tenured experience really anywhere. And having not been a top level assistant in any college program, that really kind of concerns me that I don't think he's quite ready for a job of BTSU's magnitude. Um, Now, I would love to see him come and be like a defensive coordinator or something like that at
See,
ETSU if Billy
I can
Taylor
see
isn't
that.
isn't retained. So I would love for him to come back to the university, and I'm sure Buck fans would love to have a former NFL
Mhm.
player and former ETSU alum come back to the program. But I think it's kind of unrealistic to have him being the head of the program with as little experience as he has. Um, Now that being said, he could be a fantastic coach. I just don't think, kind of going back to what I said a minute ago, ETSU can't afford to take any risk on the next head coach hire right now.
Like I was saying, no, I just wonder if he has interviewed for either
Defensive coordinator position.
um, you know,
I
just
think
with
I've heard some
him being
rumors
in.
that he was. I think I've heard some rumors before that he has put out some feelers, at least on past ETSU job
Mhm,
searches. I'm not sure how serious those conversations
mhm.
were, but at least I've heard those rumors.
Because he was at the King game earlier this week, or last week,
Yeah,
and that just seems like a random game to go to. Uh,
yeah, I did listen to him, the post game with Jay, and he was saying he does try to come up for
mhm,
at least one game every year. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I think he said he lives in Florida or Georgia,
yeah,
somewhere south
yeah,
of here.
mhm.
Um, you know, another former Buck that I was going to throw out, of course, was Marcus Satterfield. I know he's bounced around a little bit. He was actually
Mhm.
on ETSU
Yeah.
staff for a minute. What was that, under Randy Sanders, I believe? I think he was originally
Yeah.
hired as
He
Randy
was here for.
Sanders OC
OC.
for like 2 months before he took was it the Oregon
Mhm.
job or something? Let
I
me see.
think him. I, th-
Baylor job, I think.
I think him and Randy Sanders had a disagreement about who was going to call plays. I believe that's
Right.
why he left.
But yeah, and then again,
And,
it's another one of those things kind of similar
Mhm.
to Donnie Abraham, but maybe Satterfield at least has had quite a bit of assistant coach experience at the FBS level. Uh, Granted, not much of it has been sort of long tenured. He didn't have any
mhm.
um, several years of showing he's been real successful as an OC or anything. So that again kind of gives me a little bit of pause on him, but it's another interesting name to
Mm.
throw out.
I I put an unrealistic name. I forgot it. It was Steve Wilkes. He's the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Yeah, he's probably not going to come here. The only reason I even wrote him down, uh, he was actually the defensive coordinator at ETSU like way back in like 2002 or something like that.
Okay. Well, yeah, probably may have been before then because I think Billy Taylor
Yeah.
was the DC when they dropped the
Mhm.
program. So I'm curious. I didn't know that though.
Yeah, I just saw that one day when I was looking through. I was like, yeah, he was the defensive coordinator in 2002. before probably before Billy Taylor got named as
Maybe.
DC.
I wasn't sure exactly
Um,
how long Billy Taylor was the
yeah,
DC
yeah.
before the program got
hmm
disbanded.
Um,
Into some of the more realistic names here, because I wrote down a lot of
Hmm.
them.
I think a consensus sort of number one and two right now. Um, number one, that a lot of people like is uh, Zach Lujon, the OC from South Dakota State, and
Yeah,
Gardner Webb, coach, Trey Lamb. I'd
yeah,
say a lot of those are the
yeah.
two big
I'm a
names.
big fan of Trey Lamb. I think he's got a lot of aspects that are really attractive
hmm
for potentially trying to poach him. Obviously, probably the biggest reason for that is that he's been a successful Division One head coach already.
hmm
I mean,
hmm
in his 3 seasons sorry, I guess 4 seasons at Gardner Webb. Looks like the first season, I'm not entirely sure what happened. If oh no, that was probably the COVID year. They went 2-2. 2021 they were 4-7, and then 2022 they went 7-6 and won the Big South Conference, which I believe may have been their first ever conference title. But
Yeah.
I believe they also got their first ever win, if I'm not mistaken, in the playoffs that year. And then this year they're back in the playoffs. I think they play
They,
Mercer first round,
hmm
and finished 7-4 this year. But the other thing about him is, I mean, he's shown the ability to recruit. I know there's some different ways you can look at FCS recruiting, but I know Gardner Webb's been real quick to point out that they've had top 5 recruiting classes at the FCS level for each of the last 3 years. They've definitely pulled in some three-star players. I think I'm looking here on the Wikipedia page, which I'm not sure how updated it is, but they mentioned that their class in his first season had 4 3-star recruits in it. So, um, which might not sound like a lot at the level that the ETSU wants to get to, but coming from a place like Gardner Webb, which really hadn't had a lot of success, I think that's obviously really impressive. But the other important thing to note about him is he's not paid a whole lot
hmm
for the success he's had. I don't think I've seen his up to date contract, because I think he got an extension or an updated contract, a year or two ago. But I think before that he was making it right around the $200,000 range, which I think George Quarles was around
hmm
400,000. So, um, I mean, ETSU could theoretically make that pull there, and attract him over to ETSU. I know, Thomas Stokes. He's a big fan of Trey Lamb as well, and one of the Buck fans on Twitter. He's pointed out that earlier this year, Garner Webb was also down to their third string quarterback, and unlike what ETSU was doing, I think Trey Lamb even made a tweet that Garner Webb carries 5 scholarship quarterbacks for that reason, and they went out there and won a game with their third string quarterback, which I think is interesting. At the time, I almost kind of wondered if he almost took a direct jab at George Quarles, because it was right at that same time, same kind of week that we had our dismantling at the hands of Austin P. I think right around that time frame, and George Quarles was mentioning how we had all those quarterback injuries and things like that, and then out of the blue, Trey Lamb posted a tweet about that's why we keep 5 scholarship quarterbacks, and we were down to our third. I almost kind of wondered if it was like a subtweet kind of thing,
hmm
um, but he has
I,
some Tennessee ties as well. Graduated from Tennessee Tech.
I know. Just thinking about him, he's young and he's a program builder. I mean, that's two of the things we're looking for. I'd say
Yeah, exactly.
he, lots of energy. There's and I just think, yeah, like you said, since Gardner Webb, they don't have a lot of success and don't have a huge endowment or like
Yeah,
payroll, because they aren't really focused on athletics. They're more of a smaller school, private school.
right.
Um, and he
ETSU program around.
I
Compared
compared it to
to
Will
Will Healy
Healy
at
at
Austin
Austin
P.
P. It'd
Be
be
that
that
kind
kind
of
of
a hire.
hire. That's another name
Yeah,
I threw out there because he flamed out at Charlotte. He has Tennessee
right.
connections, so I could see him getting an interview.
And, and Austin P is rolling. So
Mhm.
obviously they destroyed us. Although I highly doubt Chattanooga is going to get beat 60,
Yeah,
63 to 3 or whatever we were beat by.
because
That's
he set the groundwork for that. Because
yeah,
before then, Austin P was like, I think they were 0-11 for like
8 years or
something
something.
like that, like really bad records. I just remember, and then they were all of a sudden they were like in the FCS playoffs.
yeah. And I think I remember the year they won their first playoff game. I think that was kind of
Mhm.
catapulted where they are now. Like what was the other name you mentioned? Zach Lujan. I think my cat's saying hello. So big Buck fan
Yeah,
here.
Zach Lujan.
yeah,
um, yeah, he's had a good amount of success up at South Dakota
Mhm.
State. I know he's also a South Dakota State guy as well. Graduated from
yeah,
South Dakota
yeah.
State, and he's been there ever since. It looks like he was there off 2017. Started as a quality control on the offense, moved to running back coach 2018, quarterback coach 2019 through 21, and then 2022 and this year has been their quarterback coach and OC. So obviously he's had a lot of success up there. Another young guy, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not entirely sure of his age, but started
He's in his
started college in
mhm.
2013, so I guess you can kind of do the math there.
Yeah, he'd be
Um,
in his 30s now.
probably younger than that. Probably maybe late 20s, 27, 28 maybe. Um, so it's another one of those things where it's like obviously he's talented, um, and has had a lot of success with the offense at South Dakota State. But it's also one of those things where it's like, how much did he really have to do? I know that's kind of probably an unfair thing to say, but stepping into a program that you already graduated from, which is one of the Dakota schools that's continued to reign success over FCS for a while. It's kind of interesting, how would that success translate to being a head guy in another program, especially a head program that's all the way across the country, kind of thing.
My my whole theory, like with this, is like he got since their coach retired last year, they elevated their defensive coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
and South Dakota State's offense a bright spot um, these past couple
Yeah, oh
years.
yeah, they're really good.
So so like 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 even if it's outside the
Yeah.
that's sort of the whole thing with Tyler Roll too. Uh,
And
you never
another
know.
thing about
Mhm.
real quick note about Lujan, I see that he grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and then his first college he went to was in California before he transferred to South Dakota State. So he has absolutely no ties to anywhere that ETSU
Mhm.
would actually be able to grab players from. So that's obviously a little bit of a concern, as well as a guy who grew up in the
Mhm.
Northwest and out west probably has no desire to move to the Southeast. So but who knows? Like you said, it's obviously a different
I
draw to get a head coaching offer.
I know I put a whole bunch of like the Big Sky School like
Mhm.
coordinators, even head coaches. Idaho, I put. Let me look at Idaho's OC too.
Luke Schlusner, I guess Schlusner. I'm probably butchering that. I
Because
think
I
he's
know
he's the OC at Idaho.
because I know Idaho's head coach. He came from South Dakota State. He went outside the South Dakota State program to get his head coach.
Jason Reddick.
And of course, yeah, we've mentioned Tyler Roll
Hmm.
a couple times because he was one of the uh, hard to say for sure, but I think all signs point to that he was one of the finalists. I think for the head
Hmm.
coaching job the last time around. when George Quarles would hire. And so who knows if he even wants the job now. We definitely know that he was interviewed. Keith Brake even specifically mentioned that because obviously he came from North Dakota State as well. So he said that Tyler Roll told him that he had interviewed directly for the job. Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, obviously there's some I guess you would say reason to hire a guy like Tyler Roll.
Hmm.
Like I said, who knows if he would be interested again after being overlooked the first time, and obviously the program's in a lot different situation now than what it was 2 years ago. But I
Is
mean,
he?
Roll
Is.
is 37 and
Hmm.
has been a part of the North Dakota State program since really 2004 because he played there for 4 years before being drafted by the Seahawks. And then has worked his way back to being the offensive coordinator at North Dakota State. So there's a lot to be said for being in what is essentially the Alabama or Ohio State of FCS, and being able to kind of bring that blueprint over to a program like
Hmm.
ETSU. But again, we've seen that happen for former Alabama and Saban disciples that go out there and aren't successful other places. So it's obviously not a guarantee. And he's also another guy that pretty much his entire life he's been up in the Northwest area. So kind of the same thing we were talking about Lujan.
Hmm. I know just sort of
that
Tyler
Roll
Roll
was
that close to getting the job last time. I think that's why we go out there and
Yeah,
get any of those coordinators. Um, maybe even
yeah,
go out there and find that head coach that maybe isn't paid as much. Um,
yeah. Yeah,
I,
kind of like Trey Lamb, as we indicated. Which obviously you may have some
mhm,
competition for Trey Lamb depending on what they do in the playoffs. If Gardner Webb goes out there, beats Mercer, makes the deep run into the playoffs, I mean,
mhm,
he may have some other offers, maybe even at the FBS level. I know some people have mentioned, maybe App State or other schools in the Sun Belt
mhm.
may come a calling for someone like him. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on, I think.
I
I
just
just
know going young. I think that maybe it's either we're going to go young in offensive or we're going to go old. A bit older
Yeah,
and more. I'd say
say
if we hire someone that's older, it's going to be someone defensively. To
yeah,
be
and of
honest.
course, and I think we would be remiss not to mention that Jeff Fisher was also
mhm.
what I believe was a finalist for the job a few years ago, and again, I wouldn't necessarily rule him out. I think he's doing something XFL related now. I forget. I didn't look him up.
I
Um,
think he was in the USFL. That's the job he took
maybe
after he didn't come here.
let me see what he's doing. Yeah, it looks like he is still doing something with the because yeah, he went to the Michigan Panthers in 2022, which I
Hmm.
think is what you were indicating.
Yeah.
And then he looks like he stepped into more of an executive role, and now he's like chief advisor to the Nashville Cats, which I believe is the new arena football league that Nashville picked
Hmm.
up. So it's definitely still a possibility. I think at the time, and I can't remember if Doc Sander mentioned this or where we had
Hmm.
heard it. It may have been a rumor, so take this kind of with a grain of salt. But I remember that apparently the first time around, kind of the hiccup with hiring him was that he wanted to bring his son along and wanted essentially in writing that once he was ready to step away, that they would just essentially hire his son
Hmm.
and let him kind of take over the program, which is probably a little bit too much to ask. May have been a little bit of
Yeah.
aggressive if that was the case. But who knows? I mean, it actually could be a pretty good situation if Jeff Fisher was successful and could bring his son in, kind of take over for him after that. But yeah, I think that would kind of
His
be
son is
we'd be a little bit remiss not to mention him since he was so heavily involved last time. I think he was literally I think on a plane. I think is what we had heard to Johnson City
Hmm.
when kind of the deal kind of fell apart.
I know. I think it's. I just looked it up. His son's on the staff at Tennessee State. I think.
Oh, at Tennessee State. Okay.
Yeah, because I know Jeff Fisher was rumored at Tennessee State before they.
Yeah, so he's a defensive guy too.
There was,
His son Brandon Fisher,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's his only son.
and I
Yeah,
have
that's his only son.
and I have no idea what Tennessee State's defense looks like. To be
Yeah,
honest with you,
I don't. Yeah, me either.
I
Don't
know
know
I know
what that
Tennessee
looks
State's
like.
finally had some success this year
Mhm.
under Eddie George, but um, which also I kind of take with a grain of salt because prior to this year they were part of the OVC, and then the OVC kind of fell apart, and now it's like that conglomerate of the Big South or whatever,
Mhm.
which isn't
Mhm.
as strong of a conference. So I think that's something to kind of keep in mind there. But another name I had, which I've seen also tossed around, is the OC at Montana, Taylor Housewright.
Taylor House, right? I have that on my list as well.
He's had a good amount of assistant coaching experience, starting with being a GA at Miami of Ohio, um, working his way up to being a GA at Wyoming, quality control Mississippi State. Um, I'm not entirely sure what he did at Oregon. It just says OA, offensive analyst maybe.
Mhm.
Before 2021 taking over as the OC at Montana State, and
Mhm.
obviously you're probably seeing a pattern.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
we're looking at the top programs in FCS. I mean, if you're having success out there in the Big
Mhm.
Sky, and being exactly where ETSU wants to get, there's something to be said for the guys that are part of the coordinators on those staffs.
I know sort of all those. Let me look at Montana for a minute. I know I've written down their coordinators, but had kind of a great year as well. Uh,
Mhm.
let's see,
I keep
Brent
looking over here.
Hughes.
I got another monitor off to the side, so that's what I'm looking at. Um,
Oh, that's from the Chris Peterson tree. I don't know. He's been around. He, he's probably not going to come for a head coaching job.
Another name that I wanted to kind of throw out was the UIW head coach, Clint Killoy, or I'm not entirely sure how you say that. Obviously UIW was really, really good last year. Made it deep into the playoffs. Haven't had a whole lot of success this year, I don't believe. Um, the reason I mentioned that is UIW, obviously a nonprofit, kind of a smaller university.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not entirely sure how much they pay them. Usually privates don't post their salaries out there, but it's possible that he could be interested in a job in the Southern Conference.
I know.
Um,
Yeah,
I,
I
I
was
was
going to
trying to
say
figure out what their record is this year.
it's uh it's 8-2, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they've still had a pretty good year.
They made the playoffs. Uh,
Oh yeah, 9-2.
is there not? I think they made the playoffs at least.
Oh, they had to at 9-2. I haven't.
Yeah,
I don't think
nine
they're
and
a
two.
seed, but
Yeah, because DJ King went to
Texas
Texas.
State and turn them around. And
They
hired
hired.
Young again. It's
They've
had
had
yeah,
three straight head coaches that have
gone
gone to better things.
things. They're so they're
yeah.
building
And I
quite the
mean, it's
pipeline of coaches.
yeah, and he's probably like I said, Clint Kilroy or Kill. I have no idea how to say that. It's Killough. Killo. I don't know. Obviously, he's probably in the not likely category, considering he's
Yeah,
already having a
yeah.
lot of success at another top FCS program. Um, but again, like I said, it's just mentioned him since we know he's been having some success, and I'm not entirely sure how much he makes since privates don't post their salaries out there.
I know there's two more names I kind of really want to get to that are
Yeah,
actually could be Tim Cranzy, who's the OC at Memphis. Um, he's been
yeah,
around 6 programs. He was at Montana State. He went to Nevada, Sam Houston State, um, and at Marshall as well. Uh, I feel like he could be someone we could look at. I don't know how
Yeah,
interested
definitely.
he is offensively.
I think those, and that's a good point. Those are a lot of the ones that kind of sneak up on you at this level.
Hmm.
There'll be a name or two that eventually gets leaked to who's involved in the ETSU
Hmm.
coaching search that we're not going to be able to think of because those are the ones that are hard to figure out or hard to forecast. Are the guys who are maybe assistants at a group of five or a power five even program because usually you might think that there may be, especially at a Power Five, may be out of the price range of ETSU. If you're an offensive coordinator at say UNC or something, I
Hmm.
don't just throw out
Right.
a random Power Five school. But a lot of guys are interested in maybe being a head coach, so they may be interested in taking a little bit of a pay cut to come coach and be the head guy at a program. That way they can kind of get their trajectory of their coaching tree started as a head coach because a lot of times it's unless you're the top assistant and get that was it the Broyles award
Hmm.
you're not likely to get a lot of interest as a head coach just jumping from an offensive coordinator to up to a big program but sometimes if you take that route where you've been a offensive coordinator, say in the ACC, had some success, then you go be a head coach and have some more success. That really,
Hmm.
catapults someone's career. So
Hmm.
that's a definitely something to keep an eye on.
I wrote down a few of those type of names. Just put people that are looking for a chance, and they take.
Yeah.
I know
Oh, I wrote down a name,
Charlie
Charlie
Wise
Wise
Jr.
Jr.
He's
He's
an
an
OC
OC
at
at
Ole
Ole
Miss.
Miss.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's obviously
you figure
an interesting one because you
you
got the
figure
name.
someone you figure someone like that would be like, heck yeah, I want to be a head coach. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Uh, I know another one I wrote down is former Eastern Washington coach Bo Baldwin, who's at Arizona State. I wonder if
Hmm.
he'd jump to take a chance. Oh, he may not because he was at Cal Poly and flamed out.
Yeah. And you've got these guys like that all the time, and there's
Yeah.
definitely going to be some names that pop up. Like
Hmm.
last time, I don't think anybody imagined Jeff Fisher would have been
Yeah,
interested.
that
So
was
um, but and you and I actually talked about this next name I'll mention before the call. Um, it was actually one that I came across not too long ago, which is Cade Bell at the offensive coordinator at Western Carolina, and who's the son of Kerwin Well. Um, I think he's an interesting name. I think he's probably an up and coming coach. We obviously know how successful
Mhm.
Western Carolina's offense has been the last couple of years. He was named offensive coordinator in Western Carolina in the spring of 2021, and prior to that, he was at Tusculum. So he's got the local ties. Obviously, I think he played quarterback, I believe, at Jacksonville. I think I read.
Mhm.
Yeah, he played at Jacksonville University 2011 through 2015. So was a really good quarterback as well. But during his time at Tusculum, I mean, they were the conference champions during the spring football season, and they averaged 533 yards of offense and 37 points a game. So he's had, he's shown success at the Tusculum level, which I think is D2 or maybe they're NAIA. I'm not sure. Um, and obviously has brought that kind of same offensive mindset up to Western Carolina, and prior to them kind of completely falling apart in the last couple of games of the
Yeah.
season, looked like they were destined to head to the playoffs. But I think that what they lose two of their last three.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
they've had
have had
But
some unfortunate injuries that have cost them to
yeah,
their starting running back.
oh yeah, yeah.
Starting.
Their
Yeah.
running back is
Yeah.
the one that kind of really derailed their
Mhm.
season. What's his name? Reed, I think. Desmond. Was it
Mhm.
Desmond Reed? Is that it?
Desmond Reed. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he was just he was destroying everybody. And then unfortunately he got hurt and it kind of messed up Western Carolina's offense.
Yeah. Just kind of. Uh, that's I was gonna mention that because you brought it up. Those offensive
Yeah.
numbers at the D2, and Tusculum's just down the road, you know, in Greenville. So he has ties to the area, ties to the same sort of recruiting markets. I know ETSU has a more wide market,
Hmm.
but I'd say he has
Yeah,
sort of the same area.
yeah, just being in the SoCon for a couple of years and then coaching at Tusculum, I think it's the name to keep an eye on. I think it's probably
Hmm.
kind of an outside shot. I'm sure um, Cole Spivey's probably thinking, hell no, you don't take
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
But I think it's an important name to mention. I think he could throw his hat in the ring. I don't know that he's had enough experience yet to really advance far enough into the discussions, but I think it's an interesting name to mention. I think that's I think those are the main names that I knew.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I think you may have had another one.
Wait, what'd you say?
I was saying
Oh,
I thought you had another one to go over or kind of throw out there.
I don't
I think maybe while
remember.
you're okay, I was just gonna say there was one other kind of thing I wanted to mention and kind of touch on, kind of outside of the coaching search, and who knows, maybe some current or future players, or maybe even prospective coaches are going to end up seeing this. But so one of the things I wanted to mention is that we've had back-to-back 3-8
Hmm.
seasons, and the FCS attendance numbers came out today. I don't know if you saw this, Jacob, but um, ETSU was 43rd in all of FCS this year in attendance, averaging 7,990 fans per
Wow.
game, which by stadium capacity is 103.8% of the stadium capacity technically of Green Stadium, because they don't include the hill, which they obviously sell tickets
Mhm.
to. I mean, it's just kind of crazy and kind of really speaks volumes to the fan support of ETSU, that in really back-to-back 3-8 seasons where things really aren't going well. I mean, I don't even think there was a lot of expectations coming into this year. I think I mean, you and I think had discussed back in July and August about maybe we could win 5-6 games and we'd be happy with that this year after how bad last year went. Um, so I mean, really kind of not having a lot of expectations coming in this year and still averaging 8,000 fans per game is pretty incredible, and it kind of speaks to the sort of the resources and the fan support, obviously, that ETSU has, and it really makes it an attractive coaching job for a
Hmm.
lot of people because of things like that. So that's where you end up getting names like Jeff Fisher that came out of the blue last
Hmm.
time, or Tyler Roll, where they're interested in a job like this because it's you gotta it's kind of a hidden gem. I mean, definitely in a winnable conference, but it's a conference like the SoCon that had a lot of historical success, and kind of gets knocked to the ground a lot now, that people claiming we beat up on ourselves, which is Western Carolina kind of proved that. So it's definitely a winnable conference, and as ETSU showed a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
in 2021, it's a conference that you can get a seat out of. Obviously, Furman did it as well this year. So it's definitely got everything you need to be able to succeed. It's also a public university with that's easier to get transfers into, and have graduate programs, so you can do grad students as well. So
Hmm.
it's a really big positive for ETSU. There's a lot of good things that ETSU has that are attractive to coaches who either want to come here to kind of close out their career or want to jump start it into potentially a bigger job somewhere down the line.
I know. I remember when Randy Sanders got hired after Carl Torbush retired. That was a big shock to me because it was
Yeah,
basically Florida State's offensive coordinator coming to
yeah.
ETSU. He had, I didn't realize, but like bigger connections than I realized. But just like
I did want to
those type of
mention.
names have come out of
I did just
nowhere.
kind of, since I had this list up for the the rest of the attendance, I did kind of want to touch on where the rest of the SoCon was, just to kind of give everybody an idea. So of course, number one was Jackson State. So obviously that's kind of a different level, 30,000 people than Montana. Um, just kind of give you an idea of where the top of the FCS is. NDSU is at 11 at 15,000 per game, which is apparently only 80% of their capacity. But Western Carolina, I think, comes as a shock to nobody, was the top attendance getter at almost 12,000 fans. Citadel has to be fudging numbers. Somehow at number 20 with 11,000 people per game. I don't think I've ever, unless the cadets are there that game, I don't think they ever have 11,000 people in their stands. But then it was Furman at number 23, 10,004. Mercer at 27 at 9,700. And then after that, it's just Chattanooga right in front of ETSU at 38. I mean, they had 100, 200 more average fans
Yeah.
per game. I mean, those are teams at the top of the conference, and then you've got ETSU who finishes 3-8, still drawing almost 8,000 fans. And I just kind of wanted to kind of put some perspective behind that for maybe somebody who could be listening to this that maybe isn't familiar with ETSU and the
I know
SoCon. So
we've kept up. A lot of people were still going to the games for the product that was out on the field.
yeah,
And that's because ETSU, they have a good game day atmosphere.
yeah,
They've tried to build
and
it.
I was at I mean, I went to the VMI game, which
Mhm,
was two games ago. I think we went VMI, Western, and then Citadel,
mhm.
and there was like 8,000 people there, maybe even almost 9,000. It almost looked like a sellout. There was just a little bit on the away side that wasn't full. I was shocked by that because at that time, I mean, we hadn't really had much success at all. I think we were coming off a drubbing by Chattanooga. So
Was that family
um,
weekend? It might have been
yeah,
family weekend.
yeah, it was family weekend. But I mean, I was just surprised in general. I mean,
Mhm,
even the students showed out.
mhm,
There was a whole lot of students out there, which is really I kind of give it to the
mhm.
students. I mean, they've showed up ever since the Green Stadium opened. There's a lot of students out at every game. So even George Quarles mentioned I know many times that ETSU is by far the best fans in the Southern Conference, which is obviously a motto that we use a lot for all sports, but
Mhm.
definitely the best fans in the Southern Conference. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we set a new Green Stadium attendance record on September 14th next year, because that's when
Playing North Dakota State.
North Dakota State comes to Johnson City September 14th, 2024. So whoever's
Uh,
coming in to be the new head coach gets a week 3 wake up call with North Dakota State coming in. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we have 12,000 fans in Green Stadium for that game.
that's why we should hire the Dakota coaches. Upset North Dakota State right away.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's so
know their
and then
playbook.
yeah, and I think I can't remember. I wonder if North Dakota State's site has it on there. We make the return trip either a year or two after that.
Mhm.
It's it's apparently 2 years after because it's not 2025. So yeah, 2026 we make the week 1 trip to Fargo. So
I
it's
might.
interesting. North Dakota State seems to have a fascination with the Tennessee schools right now. I think we've talked
Yeah,
about that. They play ETSU and Tennessee State next year, and then in 2026 they're playing Austin P and ETSU. So I don't know if they're trying to expand their recruiting ground into Tennessee or
mhm.
what they're doing, but I'm thankful
I,
we got that home game. Hopefully we'll be competitive and be able to pull off an upset.
talking about that, I may end up flying to Fargo to see
Be
that
a pretty cool place to be,
Fargo Dome.
especially in
Go
September.
go see go see the Fargo Dome. If who knows I'll be doing by then, but
I
uh,
think as Steve Forbes said, it's not as nice of a place to go in December, but
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe in early September it wouldn't be all that bad.
yeah, yeah. I know their fans are some of the rowdiest in FCS as far as like
Yeah,
their
just get
tailgate scene. I'd
yeah
say our fans are pretty good about tailgating. Um,
yeah they just
eh,
they have the highest expectations.
mhm.
They like we said earlier, they're kind of the Alabama
Yeah,
of FCS. So I don't know how many national championships they've won recently. It seems like
it's
at least 8 of the last 10 or something like that.
7 or 8. It's something
Yeah,
crazy like that. I know recently they've had trouble getting people to go to the games. Like they don't sell out.
yeah, I've seen that.
They're a
Um,
victim. They're a victim of their own success.
Um,
yeah,
but,
yeah, a little bit. So.
but
But yeah, that's definitely a game. Just a plug for next
mhm,
year. If anybody listening to this, make sure you get to that North Dakota State game at home because
mhm,
I mean, even regardless of what our expectations
mhm,
are, I'm sure we're going to put up valiant effort in that game to
mhm,
try to knock off probably a top 5 team.
mhm.
And anybody local to Johnson City, it's probably going to be your only chance to see a top 5 team
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not in the Southern Conference
Mhm.
come into Johnson City.
I know. Just yeah. That's all I can say. But quickly before we end the podcast tonight, I just wanted to go ahead and give us like sort of our top 3 candidates for the job. It could be top 3, top 5, whichever you want to do. I'll probably, um, that's a lot easier than picking 5 people. Um,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go
Well,
number one, number two. Let me think of who I want number two. I'm gonna go probably yeah. We'll go Trey Lamb. Number 3, Billy Taylor. That'll be my top 3.
yeah, I think uh, that's probably my really close to my top 3 as well. I think Trey Lamb's probably my number one, the Gardner
Mhm.
Webb head coach we talked about earlier. Um, I think he's shown that he's got the success at the head coaching level at this level, and he's built a program there that really didn't have success before. So there's not a lot of doubt that he could do it again. Um, so I think he's kind of my number one, out of the candidates that we've discussed, just mainly for that. Outside of that, I kind of like Tyler Roll
Mhm.
um, is my number 2. I know he was discussed last time. I think he was probably my favorite last time. If I would have been in the room with Scott Carter, he probably would have been my number 1 pick last time, just because, like we talked about, they are the pinnacle of FCS football, and not only does he coach there, but he graduated from there.
Mhm.
He's had a lot of entrenchment in that program. I'm sure he has a lot of ideas about ways to run a top program, but also the offense that they run at North Dakota State really isn't that different from ETSU,
Mhm.
and it's not. I know a lot of times, if you try to switch to like a extreme spread or an air raid offense, sometimes you don't have the right people for
Mhm.
you know the right guys on your team to be able to run that system. So I think Tyler Roll probably would not
Mhm.
have that issue coming into ETSU. Is they're going to be a run heavy offense with kind of doing things similar to what Randy Sanders was doing. Um, Obviously, with a little bit less of a drop off, especially on the line, because I think that's what North Dakota State is really puts their bread and butter into, is the fact that they've got by far the best offensive line and probably
Mhm.
defensive lines in FCS. But um, I think that system can work, and I think it's over the years they've actually switched to more of a, I would say, spread offense, but they're still obviously real heavy into their run game. So I think that's an important part for me putting him at number 2. In number 3, I'm not real sure. I don't really have I'm not necessarily sold on a number 3. Um, I mean, I definitely think one of those top, offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators at one of those top FCS programs,
Mhm.
I think would definitely be a good option. Obviously, Billy Taylor as well. I think he could definitely be somebody that could be in the mix as well. But I think I don't think I can actually give a number 3. I think I'm just kind of
Mhm.
um, on the fence with several other guys there. But I think Tyler Roll and Trey Lamb, I think, would be my top 2 right now. Maybe we can do another one of these in a week or two, or a few
Yeah.
weeks after we hear some names come out. But
Mhm.
I think right now, with the information that I have, without knowing anybody who's maybe contacted Doc with some interest, or I'm sure some other names will pop up here in the next week or so, as well. But I think it's important to note. I think it's important to note we're probably not going to have a head coach until after the FCS playoffs are done, because there's probably a really good chance that most of the people that are going to be interested in it are going to be people that are in the FCS playoffs, and obviously they're not going to go take a head coaching job at another university while they're in the middle of the playoffs, even if they kind of silently agree to it. Um, it's not going to be publicized necessarily until after the playoffs, or at least until after that team is eliminated from the playoffs.
Yeah, if it's a head coach, I'd say there's a we won't know till after the playoffs. If it's a coordinator, I could see it moving a lot
Yeah,
quicker.
yeah, it could be one of those things where we already kind of know about it, but it hasn't officially been
Yeah,
announced
yeah,
until
yeah.
after they're out. Um, but yeah, definitely
Good.
along those lines. But I am real curious though to see, Trey Lamb. I know I mentioned him as my number one. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Gardner Webb is matched up with Mercer to start in the first round of the FCS playoffs. So I'd be real curious to see how he plays versus a team that he would be facing in the SoCon if ETSU was to pull him away. So I'd be curious to see how they match
Hmm.
up.
Hmm. Yeah, just it'll be interesting to see how everything pulls out in the coaching search here for the next couple weeks, because um, just like you hear any coaching search, you hear a dozen different names. Um, although Doc's been pretty tight-lipped about uh,
Yeah,
basketball searches before.
I think ETSU in general is very tight-lipped.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think we just heard Brooks rumors of Brooks Savage, and then it happened like the next day. He got
Yeah,
hired.
I think I would say we have some rumors that flow
Hmm.
down to us that
Hmm.
probably aren't widely known. But um, no- so far, I mean, there's not really
Hmm.
a good news source that ends up having good information from ETSU. Everybody's pretty usually
Hmm.
tight-lipped about coaching searches and
Hmm.
things like that.
Yeah, that's sort of how I've thought. Like that's sort of how it is at Purdue too. Like
Yep.
rumors
Rumors last year when
Brom
Brom left
and
and
Walters
Walters
got
got
hired.
hired.
Like it was kind of it sort of came as like not fully accurate. What was actually happening?
Right.
It was like a wild goose chase. But um, I'd say that's about all we can cover tonight. I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll have more info uh, as the weeks go on, and the coaching search heats up. Um, I'm not sure when we'll have it. Um, I'm gonna do another State of the Buccaneers this week, talking about basketball. Talk about the Davidson game on Friday.
Great game. Super
I'll
excited for basketball.
I'll be yep, yep, yep. Me too. I'm gonna drop another episode whenever the head coaching uh, whenever a hire's made.
Hmm.
But I think that's about all for tonight.
Yeah,
So
I'd just say if you're not already following me on
mhm,
Twitter, ETSU_Buckeye,
mhm,
um, go ahead and give me a
mhm,
follow. I'm sure we see a head coaching rumor or anything like that, usually we'll retweet it or post about it or
mhm.
something like that, as long as it's something that's for out there in the public realm and stuff. So definitely keep an eye on Twitter if
Yep,
you're interested in
mhm,
seeing what we know.
yep. Just keep following the Bucks. Go follow Ben on Twitter. Um, so Godspeed and go Bucks. And
Good luck.
have a good night.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
No problem. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks.